Today's daf is Chulin daf Kuf Tesvav, and we are going to begin about 30 lines from the bottom of daf Kuf Yudal Ramid Beis Amar Rav Ashi. So we're learning Perikol HaBasar, the topic of which, of course, are the laws of Basar v'Chalav. And as we've seen, although the Torah mentions the loisaseh of Basar v'Chalav 3 times, the Torah doesn't mention anything about the fact that you're not allowed to eat Basar v'Chalav. What the Torah says is loisavashel gedi b'chalei v'imay. Literally, you're not allowed to cook a young goat in its mother's milk. The Torah mentions it 3 times. It's in Parshas Mishpatim, it's in Parshas Kisisa, it's in Parshas Re'eh, and it's from the 3 mentions of loisavashel gedi b'chalei v'imay that Chazal said, one is coming to teach me that you're not allowed to cook basar v'chalav, not only a gedi in its mother's milk, but you're not allowed to cook any basar v'chalav. The second mention is coming to tell me you're also not allowed to eat basar v'chalav. And the third is coming to teach me that you're not even allowed to benefit. There's an Isser Hana of basar v'chalav as well. Stating that this that we just mentioned, that the makar to the Isser Achila and the Isser Hana of basar v'chalav comes from the fact that the Torah repeated loisavashel gedi b'chalev imay 3 times. There's only one sheet in the Gemara. As we'll see in today's daf, there are 4 other sheetas. In other words, there are 5 sheetas in the Gemara. How it is we know that there's an Isser Achilas basar v'chalav. You're going to say, what do you mean? It says in the Torah 3 times loisavashel gedi b'chalev imay. It's true. It says in the Torah 3 times you're not allowed to cook basar v'chalav. But how do you know that you're also not allowed to eat basar v'chalav? How do you know that you're also not allowed to have hana from basar v'chalav? Either way, that is the topic of today's daf, and the Gemara begins with the first sheet in the Gemara, Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi said, how do you know that you're not allowed to eat basar v'chalav? I mean, even though the Torah mentions basar v'chalav, it says it doesn't ever mention anything about an Isra Achila. Said Rav Ashi, it's learned out from a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh. It's in Perik Yud Daled Pasuk Gimel. The Torah says Lo soichal kol toyeva. You're not allowed to eat anything that's a toyeva. Darshint Rav Ashi kol sheti avti lecha harehu bebal toicha. Anytime a person does something that's toyeva, what does that mean? A person does an avera, and as a product of the avera that you did, you now have food. The halacha is loy soicha. You're not allowed to eat it. So what would make something a teyeva? The fact that you did an avera with it. So it says Rav Ashi, even though this pasuk's not talking exclusively about basar v'chalav, but certainly inclusive in this pasuk is basar v'chalav. And being that the Torah says loy savashel gedi b'chalev imay, so basar v'chalav now becomes teyeva. If basar v'chalav is teyeva, then Loi soichal kol toyeva is in essence a loisaseh that you're not allowed to eat basar v'chalav. It's interesting that even though the makar, as we mentioned, to the Isser basar v'chalav, that's brought down in Shulchan Aruch right in the beginning of Siman Pei Zayin, and that's quoted throughout Shas, that there's an Isser Achila by basar v'chalav is from the fact that it says Lo Yisavash Gedi B'chalev Imay 3 times, but Rashi and Chumash actually brings Rav Ashi. On this pasuk, Lo Yisoichal Kol Toyev and Parshas Re'eh says Rashi Kol Sheti Avti Lecha, and Rashi gives 2 examples. One example he gives is a behema that's kachim that has a mum. You're not allowed to eat it. There's a loisaseh, loisoichal kol toyeva, and then Rashi says, you learn from here as well, that bashal basar v'chalav, if somebody cooks basar v'chalav, hareidava sheti afti l'cha, and his kana lachivasoi chulin kuf yodal and amid beis. But either way, so this, says Rav Ashi, is the makar to the issa basar v'chalav. But again, it's not only basar v'chalav. This is a lav shabeklalis. This is a lav that would include anything that's a toyeva. The halach is, would be included in this lav of loisoichal kol toyeva. It says the word from here you only know that basar v'chalav is also ba'achila. But we know basar v'chalav is also ba'ana as well. Where do you see that in this pasuk? It says lo yisaychal. That's achila. Where do you see ana? The Gemara to Rabavo. Dam Rabavo. Am Rabavo zakol makashin. Am lo yoichal. Lo yisaychal. Lo yisaychlu. Echad isra achila. Echad isra ana b'mashma. Ad sheyifreit lecha hakasov. Unless the Torah tells you otherwise, achila always means achila and hana. Kederech shapar lecha b'nevela. How do you know that? You learn that from nevela, because by nevela it says leger binasina uloivet kechavim b'mechiras. You know you're not allowed to eat nevela. It says the Torah loisaychlu kol nevela, and then the Torah says what should you do with it? Lager asher b'sharecha tetenena v'achala oy mocher lenachri ki am kodesh ato l'Hashem Elokecha. Either way, there the Torah says that even though loisaychal, but you're allowed to have enough from it. What are you supposed to do? You can give it to the Ger Toshav, you can sell it to the Oivik Chavim, but it's Dafka there where the Torah said Lo Yisoichal, that there's no Isser Hana, that you're allowed to give it away. You could benefit it on some level. But anywhere else the Torah says Lo Yisoichal, there the halacha is, it's not just Isser Achil, it's also Isser Hana. So Enochanami, Rav Ashi said, my whole makar is Lo Yisoichal Kol Tayeva, which at first glance would be a makar to an Isser Achila. It doesn't say anything about Hana. But there's a rule. Rabbi Avo said that every single time it says in the Torah, Lo Yoichal, Lo Yisoichal, Lo Yisoichlu, unless the Torah says otherwise, like it did by Nevela, the halach is it's Isser Achila and it's Isser Hana as well. Either way, so we just mentioned that by Nevela it says Lo Yisoichal, stating that over there it's Mutter Bahana. What does the Torah say you should do with the Nevela? The Torah says either give it to the Ger Toshav or sell it to the Oivik Chavim. That's in contrast to the Treifa, incidentally, where the Torah says like Kelev Tashlicha, but you give it to the dog. Right, it's a little confusing. By the Treifa, it's like Kelev Tashlicha. When it comes to the Nevela, either give it to a Ger Toshav or sell it to a non-Jew. So the Gemara is going to digress a little bit and bring the Machlokes Ramei Rav Yehuda that we've seen already as it relates to the halacha that a Nevela is given to the Ger Toshav or sold to the Oivik Chavim. The Tanya we learned to the Brayso, from the pasuk it sounds like you have two choices. Either give it to the Ger Toshav or sell it to the Oivik Chavim. The Ger B'Mechir Minayim. How do you know that if you want to sell it to a Ger Toshav, that's okay? Incidentally, what is a Ger Toshav? So there's different Rashis throughout Shas, but Pashtus, a Ger Toshav is a non-Jew. He's a Ben Noyach that keeps the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noyach. So he's not a Ger Tzedek. A Ger Tzedek is a non-Jew that was Megayer. He keeps 613 mitzvahs. A Ger Toshav is a non-Jew that keeps the Sheva mitzvahs B'nei Noach. He had a very unique place in the Torah because when the Yidden came into Eretz Yisrael, they were told, Le'isachaya kol neshama. They had to kill, literally, every single member of the 7 nations that populated Eretz Yisrael at that time, stating that anyone that was mekabel to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach was allowed to stay alive. So the Ger Toshav has a very special place in Allah. But either way, so says the Brayso, how do you know that if you don't want to give it to the Ger Toshav, rather you want to sell it to the Ger Toshav? That's okay. Talmud Loimar, it says Lager Titnena, and then it says Oymachar. Now, Pasha, the way you read the pasuk is Lo Yisleichel Kol Nevela Lager Sheva Sharecha Titnena Kama, oy machal nachri, right? The kama is before the oy machal nachri, not after the oy machar, before the nachri. But darshans the Gemara, loisaychlu kol nevela, you're not allowed to eat the nevela. What do you do with it? La ger asher b'sharecha titanana. Either give it to the ger, oy machar, period, or sell it to the ger. Says the Gemara, how do you know from the reverse if you want to sell it? Do you want to give it to the Oivik Chavim, not sell it to the Chavim? How do you know that's okay? Talmud Loimar Titnena Imachal Nachri. So you can read it. Titnena ve'achala. That's one option. Oymachar lenachri. Regardless, nimtza echad ger ve'echad Oivik Chavim beim v'chir beim nesina divrei Rav Meir. So even though the pasuk pshan and the pasuk would seem to say that you could give it to the Ger Toshav or sell it to the guy and not vice versa, says Rav Meir. But if you play around with the commas a little bit, you can make it work that you can either give it or sell it to the Ger Toshav and either give it or sell it to the Oivik Chavim. Yehuda argues. He says dvarim kichsavam. You're not allowed to play around with the commas, but rather no. You have to do exactly what the Torah says, which is either leger b'nesina or levik echavim b'mechir. So the Gemara, my time in the Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda's going to say, I'll prove to you I'm right. Because if Rabbi Meir is right, liftach rachmana lo yisleichel kol nevela lager asher b'sharecha titnena va'achala umachar. Does Rabbi Yehuda not want the Torah to say oy lamali? Why do you have to say oy? Shma mina. The word oy seems to be mafsik. Meaning, if what Meir is saying is right, then the Torah shouldn't have used the word oy. It would have meant like soichel kol nevela lager asher b'sharecha titnena ve'achala. Machar lenachri, and it would sound like titanena and machar is going back both on the ger and on the nachri. Oy, that word is always a mafsik, and here too it seems to be mafsik. It's being mafsik between giving it to the ger toshav or selling it to the oivik chavim. Thus, the ger b'nesinu oivik chavim mechir. Ramei Rabalacha, hay oy lahaktim nesinu the ger the mechir oivik chavim. The reason the oy is there not to be mafsik and to tell me that you have to give it to the ger toshav or you have to sell it to the guy, but you can't do it in the reverse. Rather, oy is coming to tell me a kedima, that it's more ideal to give it to the Ger Toshav than it is to sell it to the Oivik Chavim. So that would be the most ideal option. And what Rabbi Yehuda? I don't need a pasuk to tell me that. Why? Believe it or not, there's an obligation for a yid to take care of the ger toshav. It's actually a pasuk in Parshas Bahar. The pasuk says, if your brother is going to be poor and he's going to need help, says the Torah, you should help him. That is the most basic, fundamental principle of being a yid. Says the Torah, ger v'toshav v'chai. And then the Torah throws the ger toshav into this pasuk. The pasuk shat, the Torah is coming to say that this mitzvah of v'chiyamu chachicha u'mata yada imach v'chzakta is not only true for a yid, and it's not only true for ger tzedek. It's true for ger toshav as well. A ger toshav is included in that mitzvah of the hechzakta. So it says Rabbi Yehuda, it's pashut. If I have two options right now, what to do with my basan avela, I can either sell it to a guy I could profit off of it, or I can give it to a ger toshav. It's mistaber that's the more likatchila option. Why? Based on this pasuk in Parshas Bahar, based on the pasuk ger v'toshav v'chayimach. If I sell it to a guy, I'm not being mekayim a mitzvah deraisa. If I give it to a ger toshav, I'm actually doing something very good with it. As a result, it makes a lot of sense that would be what I'm supposed to do. So I don't need oy for that. Thus, what is oy coming to tell me? That no, either you give it to the ger toshav or you sell it to the ovik yechavim. You can't do it in the reverse. According to a mayor, it's not dafka. Other. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it is dafka. It has to be done in that specific way. Either way, zok the Gemara vayta. Simin Shabbos chayresh v'kilei zram oisev es benoi v'shi luacha kan. So the first makar that the Gemara brought to the Isra Achila of Basa V'Chalav, which is also a makar to the Isra Anas Basa V'Chalav, is Rav Ashi, and he learned it from a general pasuk in Parashas Re'eh. It says Lo Yisoich Al Kol Te'eva. Incidentally, that pasuk Lo Yisoich Al Kol Te'eva is the heading of the many psukim that are in Parashas Re'eh that talk about Machalos Asuros. So when you think of a parsha in the Torah that talks about Machalos Asuros, you think of Parashas Shmini. But in Mishnah Torah, there's another parsha. You have Parashas Re'eh. So the Torah begins with Lo Yisoich Al Kol Te'eva, and then you have all the kosher animals and non-kosher animals, and all the simonim, and then you have the chagavim, and you have the oifis, and then you even have basa v'cholav. So you have a whole parsha of macholas asuros, but it begins with those words, lo yisoich al kol te'eva. And Rav Ashi said, even though it doesn't mean specifically basa v'cholav, but at the same time we learn from there, kol sheti avti locha. The halacha is you're not allowed to eat basa v'cholav is toyeva, because what is basa v'cholav? Derech bishul asur Torah, and if you will mevashel the basa v'cholav, you will over the lav of loisa vashel gedi b'chalevim. So right now it's a toyeva. Once it's a toyeva, it takes on a life of its own. Now you have this iser of loisoichal kol toyeva. And the Gemara is going to ask kashas on Rav Ashi. In fact, the Gemara is going to ask 7 kashas on Rav Ashi from basic lavin in the Torah that we're all familiar with, to see how it stims, how it reconciles with this new idea of kol sheti avti l'cha, that any time a person does a ma'isa avera, so to speak, it's going to be us. Great to Gemara. Ma'isa Shabbos litzeru. If someone's mechal Shabbos, he cooks on Shabbos, and now because of cooking on Shabbos, he has food. It should be us to eat that food. Dati avti l'cha, because isn't there an idea of kol sheti avti l'cha? We know, stating that, Zok Rashi, it was a sugi in the beginning of Masechtas Chulin, Daf Tes Vavam and Aleph, that if someone's mevashel the Shabbos, there's a lot of nuances. Was it b'shoigig? Was it b'mezid? With regards to he himself benefiting from it, other people benefiting from it. L'chura, why is it such a confusing sugya? Why are there so many shittas in the Tanakh? The kasha is, if there's an idea of kol sheti avti l'cha, that in and of itself makes it asa b'achila. So every mevashel b'Shabbos should have this issue of kol sheti avti l'cha. It's not a kasha, because it says with regards to Shabbos, ushmartem es haShabbos ki kodesh ilochem, and we learn from there, he kodesh, Shabbos is kodesh, ve'ein maaseh kodesh, but maaseh Shabbos is not kodesh. So Shabbos has kedusha, but the result of something that you do on Shabbos. So, for example, if someone's mechalul Shabbos, the outcome of that chilul Shabbos is not going to be considered kodesh. And as a result, if the outcome is not going to be considered kodesh, that means, if it's not kodesh, it means it's not asa b'achila. Now, at first glance, how do you even read this Gemara? What does the Gemara want? The Gemara wants that ma'aseh Shabbos should be toeva. If it's toyeva, that means it's the antithesis of kodesh. It means it should be asa v'achila. So you know why it's not toyeva? Because we have a drasha that Shabbos is kodesh, but ma'aseh Shabbos is not kodesh. So the result of a ma'aseh Shabbos can't have kedusha. We don't want it to have kedusha. We want it to be tayeva. It's just the opposite. It's pink fakir. Now, what are we trying to? What's the Gemara's kasha? If there's an idea of kol shetiyavti l'cha, if someone's mavashel l'Shabbos, so now the food should be tayeva. So why is there sugis and shas about mavashel l'Shabbos? L'chayra, if you are mavashel l'Shabbos, then right now I have tayeva. So, you know why it's not tayeva? Because it's a drosh. Shabbos is kodesh, but Ma'aseh Shabbos is not kodesh. And being that Ma'aseh Shabbos is not kodesh, that means it's not tayeva. What do you mean? Because it's not kodesh, it shouldn't be kodesh. We don't want it to be kodesh. We want it to be tayeva. But the Torah says it's pasha. Because what does the word kodesh mean? So people think that the word kedusha means what the name would seem to suggest. It's very holy. It's in a very lofty, very dahaybana place. But that's really not what it means. The word kedusha means rachak. It means you're removed from it. Now, when something is kadosh in the typical sense, you're removed from it. If it's very dahaybin, if it's very nisroimim, then obviously you're removed from it. But something could be kadosh because it's tameh. Something could be kodesh because it's tayeva, because it's something that's disgusting. It's something that you can't go near. What's the makar to this? It's actually a pasuk in the Torah. It says, "Lo-sizra karmecha kilayim." You're not allowed to plant regular seeds together with a vineyard. Pentikdash hamaleya hazera asher tizra utvus aker. This is the halacha of kilei aker. But the Torah's lashon is leisisra karmecha kilayim pentikdash. So what does tikdash mean? Zok Rashi, pentikdash ketargumai tistaev. Tistaev is a lashon of tumma, a lashon of disgusting. Kol davar hanitav ala adam, says Rashi. Anything that's disgusting, bein lishvach kigoin hektish, bein lignai kigoin iser neufel by lashon kodesh. So he says the word kodesh doesn't inherently mean good. It can mean good, it can be bad. It means remove. Nitav in a good sense, l'shvach, and nitav in a bad sense, lignai. So says the Gemara, Shabbos is kodesh, but Ma'aseh Shabbos is not kodesh. Ma'aseh Shabbos is not kodesh in a good way, and Ma'aseh Shabbos is also not kodesh in a bad way. It's not the kedusha, it's also not the unholy kedusha. We have a raid bite, unholy kedusha. The whole raid bite is this Rashi right here, Pashas Kiseitze. But this is a Gemara where you see that the Gemara is timing that the word kodesh goes both ways. I mean that it goes both ways. Even though in Svara it would make sense maybe to say that Ma'aseh Shabbos should be Asa B'Achila, based on Rav Ashi's drasha, it should be no different than the lav of Basa V'Chala. But you have this halacha of Ki Kodesh Yilochem. Zok the Gemara, Chayresh B'Shar U'B'Chamar. What if somebody is Chayresh B'Shar V'Chamar? That's something you're not allowed to do. It's one of the implementations of the halacha of kalayim. There's a whole bunch of different types of kalayim. There's shatnez, but one of them is you're not allowed to be Chayresh with your shor and chamar together. So let's say you are, and now something grew in this field. You shouldn't be able to eat from the field. We know the halachas you are allowed to. V'chaysim pi par v'dashba. But what if someone's over the loisas? They have loisachsim shor b'disha. Somebody puts a muzzle on the mouth of his para, which is something that he's not allowed to do, and the para did work in the field. So the halach is he shouldn't be able to eat. Why? Dati afti l'chahu. So the Gemara, no, it can't be. You know why? Because hashto ma Shabbos the chamir ma'aseh mutarim madach Shabbos, which is so chamer. Ma'aseh Shabbos is very chamer. It's chayvi krisos, it's chayvi misas bezdin. If somebody does it even b'shoigig, he has to bring a korban chatos. Still, the halacha is we darsha ki kodesh yilochem hi kodesh v'maseh kodesh. You don't have the lav of lo yisoichal kol toyeva. So kilei zira'im. Then certainly these has to be the same halacha. Meaning, how's it possible that if somebody does melacha with a shor v'chamar, or if someone's over leisachsim shor b'dishay, that the outcome of the lav that he did should be worse than Ma'aseh Shabbos? So once we know that by Shabbos you don't have the halacha of leisoichal kol te'eva, kal v'chomer, you're not going to have leisoichal kol te'eva from the product of work in the field that was done in a way of kalayim, or from the product of work in the field that was done when somebody was being gover loisachsim shor b'dish. Now Rashi asks a very obvious question: how do you know to compare chayresh b'shar v'chamar and chaysim pi para v'dashba to Ma'aseh Shabbos? Maybe compare it to Basa V'Chalav, which we said was included in Loisoichal Kol Te'eva. Meaning, Rav Ashi said Loisoichal Kol Te'eva is a real drush, and he learns from there that Basa V'Chalav, being that it came about through Te'eva, came through Bishul Basa V'Chalav, which you're not allowed to do. The Torah says that's how we know now you can't eat it. You can't eat the product of Bishul Basa V'Chalav. Thus you're not allowed to eat Basa V'Chalav, even though it doesn't say Mefurish in the Torah. That's your makar. Stating that Shabbos, I know it's not that way. Shabbos have a drash, Ki Kodesh Yilochem, He Kodesh, Ve Maseh Kodesh. The Gemara says that If someone is chayrish b'shar v'chamar, or if someone's chaysim pi par v'dashba, that's more comparable to Ma'aseh Shabbos than to the halachas of Basa v'chalav. How do you know that? And maybe make the kavach chaymer by Basa v'chalav also from Shabbos. Shabbos is more chamar than Basa v'chalav. Shabbos is Shabbos. Basa v'chalav is only a loisaseh. So for some reason, Basa v'chalav, Rav Ashi is very comfortable learning into the pasuk loisaychal kol te'eva. But when it comes to chayrish b'shar v'chamar and v'chaysim pi par v'dashba, there Rav Ashi says I can't. You know why? Because I have a kavach chaymer from I have the same kavach chaymer from Shabbos as relates to Basa v'chalav. So it says Rashi very important. You say just to understand Pashim Shana in this Gemara. He says there's a difference between bishul Basa v'chalav and between chayrish b'shar v'chamar or chaysim pi par or even Ma'aseh Shabbos. What's the difference? The difference is bishul Basa v'chalav. I cook the food. You want to eat food that I was over a loisaseh with. What was the loisaseh? Cooking the basa v'chalav. You took the basa, you put it into a pot. You took the chalav, you put it into a pot. You cooked it. The issur was done with the food. Now you want to eat the food? That's loisoichal kol te'eva. Ma'aseh Shabbos, what was the avera? The avera was Shabbos. I defiled the Shabbos. The way you defiled the Shabbos was through cooking food. But the point is, it's a more esoteric chil Shabbos. You're chayrish b'shar v'chamar yachdav. So you have a shar and a chamar. You did the avera with the behema. You're not coming to eat the behema now. What do you want to eat? You want to eat the produce. You want to eat the tfuah that grew in the field, that came through the work that you did with the parah. You were chaysim the mouth of the parah. So you did an avera with the parah. Now you want to go ahead and eat the tfuah where the parah worked. That's already a step removed. So when it comes to chayresh b'shar v'chamar or chaysim pi parah v'dashba, that's more of a tzushtel to Shabbos. It's less of a tzushtel to basa v'chalav. Therefore, you only dash in basa v'chalav where the loisaseh was done with the food itself. But if the loisaseh wasn't done with the food itself, over there you're not going to have the halach. Fake the Gemara. What about kilei? What if somebody planted kalayim? See, this is already different. You didn't do work in the field with animals in a way of kalayim, but you actually planted the kalayim. Here you did the avera with the food itself. This is already comparable to bishul basa v'chalav. The halach is you shouldn't be able to eat what grows. We know you are allowed to. Being that it says by kilei hakerem, if somebody plants kalayim, but it was kilei hakerem, meaning one of the two minim was a kerem. But what's the difference between regular being zareh kalayim and kilei hakerem? The difference is very simple. Kilei hakerem, one of the two minim, one of the two ingredients was a kerem. If it's a kerem, it becomes more chaver. And by kilei hakerem, the Torah says pen tikdash, and we darshan pen tikdash means pen tukad eish. You have to burn it. It's even aser ba'ana. Mecha, you see from there, the kilei zram shari. The kilei zram is mutter. Because if kilei zram was also aser, then why is it only saved by kilei hakerem? So you're right. And svara, it should be included in lo yisoichal kol te'eva, stating that I have a drasha not to. Kilei kerem asur be'im achila be'im ba'ana. Kilei zram ba'achila asur ba'ana shari. Fake the Gemara. Maybe you're right. Kilei kerem is more chava than kilei zram, and you see that for sure because the Torah said pen tikdash, pen tukadesh. You have to even burn it. So you see from there that kilei kerem is more chava. But maybe the way that kilei kerem is more chava is that it's asabana. Maybe kilei zram is taka not asabana. That's mafurish. But maybe at the very least it's aser be'achila. Zok the Gemara. It can't be. Why? Because iskish lekilei behema. Because kilei zraim is ikdash the iskush lekilei behema the chsiv behem techalei sabia kalayim tzadcha loy sizra kalayim. We learn from there ma behem techayotzi men muteres. Just like when it comes if somebody mates two animals, so the offspring of the animals are going to be mutter. Tzadcha yotzi mena mutter. Meaning you're right. The makar is not from kilei hakerem because from kilei hakerem all you see is that kilei hakerem is mochamer. Maybe it's mochamer in the sense that it's asavana, but maybe even kilei zram is aser b'achila. Why would it be aser b'achila? Because of the same pasuk Rav Ashi asked, tell me the pasuk b'chalav is aser b'achila. Should teach me maybe that this is aser b'achila as well. Stating that, I know from somewhere else because it says behem techalei sabia kalayim, and I know the offspring of those two behemoths are mutter, even though you should say lo yisoichal kol te'eva, because the offspring of the behemoth's kalayim should be similar to the bishul basa v'chalav, and it should be also b'achila. And so you see that it's not. So it's for that reason that it says the Gemara that uvikilei behema gufay minol. And how do you know kilei behema itself is also maybe it's not mutter, maybe it's aser. Why should it be aser? So the Gemara says, for the fact that the Torah needs a pasuk to tell me that you're not allowed to put kalayim on the mizbeach, I know from there that lehedyet must be mutter. Because if you're going to tell me that it's asur lehedyet, then I don't need a pasuk to tell me that it's asur l'gvaya, because anything that a hedyet's not allowed to eat can't go on the mizbeach. Mimashke Yisrael. So from the fact that I need a special pasuk to tell me that the offspring of kalayim is pasul to be brought as a carbon, that's a raya. That's a raya that it must be that it's mutter b'achila. So once kilei behema is mutter b'achila, and I have a hekish behem t'chalei sabir kalayim sod chalei sizra kalayim. So even though I have leisoich al kol teheva, still the halach is that kilei zron is going to be us mutter b'achila. Freik the Gemara, oisei vesbenoi litzar. Oisei vesbenoi should be aser. If somebody shechts oisei vesbenoi, so he was over a loisa, I say, but you're allowed to eat the food. Why are you allowed to eat the food? L'chayra, why don't you say, loisoich al kol te'eva, you did an avera with this behemoth. Again, here it's the behemoth itself. So the Gemara gives the same test. Being that oisei vesbenoi is not allowed to go on the mizbeach, and the Torah needs a pasuk to tell me that it's not allowed to go on the mizbeach. So you see from there that it must be mutter lehedyet, because again, if it was aser lehedyet, that Mimashki Yisrael would already teach me anything that a hedyet is not allowed to eat is not allowed to go on the mizbeach. One last question: Shiluach Hakein, also known as Shiluach Hakan. What about Shiluach Hakan? That should be aser. So what does it mean Shiluach Hakan? So Rashi has two pshat. It's a little bit of a hard Rashi, but Rashi's pshat that he prefers is a Shiluach Hakan when you did it properly, where you took the mother and you sent her away. Shalech t'shalach ha'sa'im, v'abonim tikach lach. The halacha is that even over there, the mother should be us. You shouldn't be able to eat the mother. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything that I was supposed to do. So Rashi says that being that when the mother was sitting on the kan, I wasn't just allowed to take the kan. I had to first send the mother away. So it was chal, some isser on the mother. So maybe the halacha is that you should never be able to eat the mother. So we'll have to save this Rashi for when we learn Perek Shiluach Hakan. It's the last Perek in Masechtas Chulin, only a few weeks away. But either way, says the Gemara, Shiluach Hakan should be also based on this idea, this very shvera idea of Leisoich al kol te'eva as it relates to Shiluach Hakan, but the Gemara says it can't be because Le'omre Torah shalach l'takol. Torah would never say send away the aim if it's asa b'achila, because now someone's going to stumble upon it and it's going to be boli de takol. Is in a bottle, taruvas yavish biyavish, ein bevatlanis l'katchila. So we spoke a little bit about that already. But either way, Le'omre Torah shalach l'takol. So the fact that the Torah said send it away must be that it's not asa. Either way, this concludes the first pshat of the Gemara, the first of 5 makayros. How do you know that there's an isser achilas? It just says in the Torah, it doesn't say a word about achila. It's true, but it says it's the heading to the parsha of the Macholes Asuros and Parshas Re'eh, and it teaches me kol sheti afti lecha, anything that's toeva, I'm not allowed to eat. Basa v'chalav is toeva, because how do you get basa v'chalav? By cooking it. Only derech bishul asur Torah. Once you cook basa v'chalav, you are even allowed. That the Torah says 3 times. Thus it's toeva. If it's toeva, you're not allowed to eat it. And if you eat it, it takes on a life of its own now. And you're over a general leisase of loiseichal kol toeva. And loiseichal kol toeva applies to other isurim. The Gemara asked a bunch of kashas. It should apply to this. It should apply to that. And the Gemara said some terutzim to answer those kashas. Says the Gemara, the second makar amrish lakish. How do you know the basa v'chalav is also b'achila? And also b'hana Talmud loymar. It says in the Torah al toichlu mimenu na ubasha mevushel by mayim. So here's your hilchas Pesach shloishim yom koydem l'chag. It says in the Torah regarding the korban Pesach, you had to roast it. You weren't allowed to eat it cooked. You couldn't even eat it na. What does na mean? Half cooked. So you couldn't eat it half cooked, and you couldn't eat it cooked. But the Torah says ubashel mevushel. Why does it have to say ubashel mevushel? It should have just said al toichlu mimenu na ubashel. Al toichlu mimenu na. Ubashal mevushal, the word mevushal is extra. Not Talmud mevushal says Reish Lakish loyim l'cha. Yesh l'cha bishal achashuk gazeh. It's coming to reference another bishal. Bishal basa v'chalav. It's coming to teach me that bishal basa v'chalav is like the korban Pesach. Wow. This is a basa v'chalav. And just like the korban Pesach is aser b'achilo b'ana, right? You have to follow very specific guidelines as it relates to the korban Pesach. But a korban is aser b'achilo unless you eat it the way you're supposed to eat it in the prescribed time, the kedusha v'tahira, and the right person eats the right part. part of the carbon. And of course, there's an Isser Me'ila, there's an Isser Anah when it comes to the carbon Pesach. So too, Basav V'chalav, Bishul Basav V'chalav is Aser B'achila, it's Aser B'anaf. This is what Rish Lakish said. I'm only Rabbi Yechanan. If you have Rish Lakish, you can have Rabbi Yechanan. So Rabbi Yechanan told Rish Lakish, Kura Zusha Shana Rebbe, said Rish Lakish is a nice drasha. But why do we, the Amiran, need to make up a new drasha, an extra word, Mavushal, to tell me the Isser Achilas Basav V'chalav? Is there something wrong? Ku'urazu, is there something wrong with the drasha that Rebbe already said? What was Rebbe's drasha? It says in the Torah, Loi Toichlenu. So this is a pasuk in the Varim. It's Perek Yud Beis, pasuk Kafeh. It's a parsha in the Torah that we've seen many times in Masechtas Chulin. It's the parsha of Basar Taiva. The basis that Machlokes, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, if the Yidden were allowed to eat Basar Taiva when they were in the Midbar, etc., etc. But either way, it's in that pasuk the Torah says, Loi Toichlenu, and then it says, Allah Aretz Tishbechenu Kamayim. It's referring to behema that's kachim, that now has a mum, psuli hamikdashim, and the Torah says, "Now let it eat the dan." And then it says again, "Loi toichlena." Some tzveitin mo, "L'man yitav lecha ulevanecha acharecha ki taseh hayashar be'enash." Says Rabbi Yochanan, even though the pashat pshat in that context over there is dealing with psuli hamikdashim. Psuli HaMikdashim is an animal that's kachim that now has a mum. So even though we're talking about Psuli HaMikdashim, stating that, but basa v'chalav akasim medaber. Now, first glance, what does basa v'chalav have to do with anything? I'm talking basa v'chalav akasim medaber. Oyeni ela be'echa mikol yisum shevetayra. Maybe it's talking about something else. Right? Mecha teisi loy teichlenu is talking about basa v'chalav. Amrit tzeiul l'mam shloish esrei midos she'atar nedreshes behem. So Rebbe said, no, it's shloish esrei midos she'atar nedreshes behem. Also, davar lo midyana. That one of the is that you have to look at the general context of a pasuk. So if you have a pasuk, you're not sure what the pasuk is saying, look at the context, and the context is going to give guidance as to what this particular pasuk is referring to. The Torah is talking about Psuli HaMikdashim. Psuli HaMikdashim is, believe it or not, comparable to Basav V'chalav, because it's made up of two minim. It's kachim, but being that it has a mum, so it's also a shtickle chulin. So it's b'shtei minim akasim medaber. Afkan b'shtei minim. Basav v'chalav is also shtei minim. So it says in that parsha an extra loy teichlenu. Again, it says loy teichlenu ala aretz tishbechenu kamayim, and then it says loy teichlenu l'man yitav v'chalav v'nachak rachitasa yash b'nei Hashem. So it says the word loy teichlenu extra. Why? It's coming to teach me that basav v'chalav is also b'achil. Where do you see basav v'chalav? It's davar alam ben yana. Davar alam ben yana is anything but basav v'chalav. No. If you look into it a little bit deeper, there's a basav v'chalav reference here, because Psuli HaMikdashim is similar to basav v'chalav. How? Because Psuli HaMikdashim is a taroivis of minim. It's kodesh, because it's kachim, but it's also, it has a mum. You can be paid the Psuli HaMikdashim, there's a tzad chulin. Right? Not all kachim that's psulim has a tzad chulin, but when it has a mum, it has a tzad chulin, because you can be paid it. Once there's a mum, you can be paid it, which gives it a tzad chulin. The point is, it's the taroivis minim in Psuli HaMikdashim. Thus, the extra word, loy techlenu, is coming to tell me a lav, an isra achila, or something else that's a taroivis minim. What is that specifically? Basa v'chalav. But either way, it's Rabbi Yochanan told Reish Lakish, I have a mefurish in Makar. I have Rebbe. Rebbe already told me the Makar to isra achila, basa v'chalav. So why do you have to come on to a bashal mavushal? So Reish Lakish said, had I only had that pasuk, I would have thought, hani mili b'achila. Maybe there's only an isra achila. Avo b'hana loy, but maybe isra no, not kamash malan. That's why he needed a bashal mavushal b'mayim to tell me that not only is there an isra achila, but there's also Isra Anah. Because the carbon Pesach is also Asabana. The Rebbe, Ba'anamin. He had his Rebbe who just darshan Loi Teichlenu. What do you see in Loi Teichlenu alone that is going to be an Isra Anah? Now, at first glance, what would you say? Rabavo. Rabavo was the teretz when the Gemara asked the same question of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi's makar was Loi Seichal Kol Teyeva. That's only an Isra Achila. What was the answer? Achila always means Achila and Anah. Actually, Yifreit L'cha Akasam. Unless the Torah tells you otherwise. Like it did by Nevela. That's why we had a whole digression of a half of Gemara right in the beginning of this morning's daf. To talk about Nevela. Why are we talking about Nevela? We're learning Basav V'chalav. Because that's the makar that Achila always means Achila and Anah. But the Gemara doesn't answer that. The Gemara gives different terutzim. Number one, Nafkele Mehacha. Nemakan, it says, Ki Am Kodesh Atal Hashem Eloikecha. That's in the context of Basav V'chalav. One of the three times that the Torah mentions the lav of Basav V'chalav, it prefaces it with the words, Ki Am Kodesh Atal Hashem Eloikecha Lo Yisavash Gubech Alevimai. V'nemer Lahalon, and it says, by Isurei Bia, Lo Yeh Kodesh Mebnei Yisrael. A yid is not allowed to be a zayna or be bayal a zayna. It's learned out from yir kadesh mibnei. It's what ma'ala halam b'hana. Just like over there, you're not dealing with achila. We're dealing with bia, which is not an isra achila, it's an isra hana. Afkan b'hana. So to here, basav v'chalav is going to be also b'hana. Vera b'lazatana, a different makar. It says lo yisoichlu kol nevela. And then the Torah says, Lo Savashal Gedi B'Chalev Imay. So that pasuk that we had earlier at the beginning of the daf, like these Gemaras, it always helps. The more familiar you are with the Torah Shabbat. But those psukim that the Gemara brought of Nevela, that you have two choices, either you can give it to the Ger Toishav, or you could sell it to the Oivik Echavim. Believe it or not, that pasuk is the same pasuk that mentions Lo Yisavashal Gedi B'Chalev Imay. It says Lo Yisoichel Kol Nevela. I'm reading the whole pasuk. L'ger Hashem B'Sharech T'Tnena V'Achala Oy Machal Nachri Ki Am Kodesh Atal Hashem L'Kecha Lo Yisavashal Gedi B'Chalev Imay. Right? It says Lo Yisavashal Gedi B'Chalev Imay 3 times. Parshas Mishpatim, Parshas Kisisa, Parshas Rei. Mishpatim Kisisa. What's the context? This was the intro to Basav V'Chalav. Bekurim, and even more generally, Shalish Pa'amim Ba'ashani Yirah Kol Zchurchas B'nei Hashem L'Kecha. That in the context of the mitzvah to be Oile Regel, and the mitzvah Bikurim, Reishas Bikurim Ad Maschot Havi Beis Hashem L'Kecha, Lo Yisavashal Gedi B'Chalev Imay. Then you have it in Parshas Rei in the context of the Macholos Asuros. And in the Macholos Asuros, the juxtaposition is not being either regel or bikurim, but rather it's nevela. So loisoichlu kol nevela. L'ger Hashem b'sharech t'ner b'chala, and then it says loisavash g'li b'chalavim. Said Devei Rabbi Eliezer and the Yeshiva Rabbi Eliezer. They said a geshmak gazach. They said it says loisoichlu kol nevela, and then loisavash g'li b'chalavim. We learn from there. Amra Torah kishetim gerena loisavash ladam tim gerena. Meaning you can give it to a ger toishav, have enough from that. The tovas enough. You can sell it to a guy. According to Rameh, or even in the reverse is an option. But at the same time, don't cook it first and then do that. Because if you're going to cook it first, then there's going to be an Isser Hana. You're not allowed to cook Basav V'Chalav together and then give it. That's the Makar, and that's why the Torah threw it into that pasuk to tell me that you want to give it to a guy, that's fine. But not if you cook Basav V'Chalav, because Nevela you could, but Bishul Basav V'Chalav is Asa B'Hana. Either way, that's how you know the Isra Hana. Zok the Gemara. So how many Makaras do we have so far to the halacha of Achila Basav V'Chalav? We have Rav Ashi. That was the majority of the daf. Rav Ashi said, Lo yisoichal kol tayeva, and we learn from there that anything that's tayeva is also b'achila. Basav v'chal is tayeva because you over the loisa, say a bishul basav v'chal. That's for sure you over. Once you mevashal basav v'chal, takes on a life of its own. Lo yisoichal kol tayeva. Reish Lakish learned it from Karban Pesach. Al toichel mimenu na ubashal mevushal alayim. The word mevushal is actually bashal mevushal. It's redundant. It's always, anytime the Torah gives a double lash coming to teach me something. In this case, what it's coming to teach me is that there's another bishul basav v'chal that's like the Karban Pesach. It's going to be asa b'achila. It's going to be asa b'ana. Then we had Rebbe. Rebbe said it says the pas. It says loy toichlenu ala oretz tishbechenu kamayim. But then it says again loy tochlenu l'manyitav l'cha u'luvanecha acharecha kitase yoshev eni Hashem. An extra loy tochlenu in the Parsha of Psuli HaMikdashim. It's extra dover alama ben yanai to teach me an isser loy tochlenu with regards to something else that's like Psuli HaMikdashim, that it's a tarovis of minin. Psuli HaMikdashim is kachim and chulin. Once it has a mum, it's a tarovis minim. Basav v'chalav is a tarovis minim. To tell me there's an isser chila there as well. How do you know isser hana? As according to Rebbe, so the Gemara just gave 2 teruts. Either way, talk the Gemara a fourth mikar. Very Rabbi Shmuel Tana leisavashel gedim b'chalev imoy shalish pamim. This is one that we know. Echad isser achila, ve'echad isser hana, ve'echad isser bishul. Talk the Gemara Tanya, a 5th mikar. We're going to start the 5th mikar, but it goes very deep into tomorrow's daf. I mean, not so deep, but in Ichos, pretty deep into tomorrow's daf. So we'll just start it, and the rest is tomorrow's daf. How do you know that basar v'chalav is aser? It says ki am kadosh ato. That's the 3rd mention, the one in Parashas Rei. And it says regarding the treifa, v'anshe kodesh tiyun li. Very similar. So by basa v'chalav it says ki am kadosh ato. And by the treifa it says va'anshe kodesh tiyun li ubasar basar the treifa lo yisaychel malahalon aser. Just like over there it's aser afkan aser. Just like the treif is also b'achila, b'asa v'chalav is also b'achila. So Eli ala b'achila, b'anam inayin, amid kal v'chayim. U'ma orla, shalei nevda b'avera asur b'anam, madach orla, which did not have an avera done with it. What's orla? The first 3 years, fruit that grows in Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to eat. And you also can't have anah from it. No avera was done, you have a an apple tree in your backyard. You didn't necessarily do anything wrong. Still, it doesn't matter. The Torah says that the first 3 years, it's asab achila, asab hana. So madach arla, where there was no avera done, still it's asab achila and hana, emphasis on hana. Basav v'chalav, shenevda by avera. Eino dinsha asab hana. Basav v'chalav, when avera was done, bishul, so for sure should be asab hana. Feitmar mala, arla shkein l'hois l'shas HaKosher. Arla is different. Arla was never mutter. And being that it didn't have a shas HaKosher, that's a real kachim svara. Being that it didn't have a shas HaKosher, so maybe it's for that reason it's also asab hana. But basav v'chalav, before you cooked it, each min was mutter. So maybe it should be different. It should be more cooler than it should be mutter b'anos. The Gemara says chametz b'Pesach yirchiach. Sha'isel shas HaKosher. Chametz on Pesach had a shas HaKosher before Pesach. V'asab hana, and still it's asab hana. So you see that just because something has a shas HaKosher doesn't necessarily mean it should be mutter b'ana. Malu chametz b'Pesach kedosh. But how you prove anything about chametz b'Pesach? Chametz b'Pesach, you're right. It had a shas HaKosher, but it has a whole separate set of issues. It's chayvei krisos. Chametz b'Pesach is way more chamer than anything that we've been talking about. So don't bring me rayas from chametz b'Pesach. So, but the Gemara says, no, kilei hakerem yechichu. For that, I could be mechiach from kilei hakerem. She'ein anush kares v'asab hana. Either way, from a combination of Orla and Chametz and Kilei HaKerem, this Kal V'chomer with a Mahatzad, I can learn that Basav V'chalav is not only Asab Achila, as Isi ben Yehuda proved from his Gzeir Shava from Treifa, but it's going to be Asab Hana as well. Either way, the Gemara is going to be Meirich as it relates to this Kal V'chomer, and once you have the Kal V'chomers, why do I even need the Gzeir Shava? And that's already into tomorrow's daf. But regardless, we had 5 Mekayres in today's daf as it relates to the Isser, Achila, and Isser Hana of Basa v'chol. Rav Ashi learned it from Leiseichal Kol Teyeva. Anything that's Teyeva, you're not allowed to eat. Mishlakish learned it from the Parasha of Karban Pesach. Ubashal Mevushal B'mayim. Rabbi Yochanan brought Rebbe's Braisa, who learned it from the Parsha Psuli HaMikdashim, the extra mention of like Taichleno, just like Psuli HaMikdashim is a Tarevis Minim, Basa v'cholav is a Tarevis of Minim as well. Fair Rabbi Shmuel said it just says it 3 times in the Torah, Leis Avashik Libach Levimai, Echad L'Sebishal, Echad L'Sarachiva, V'echad L'Isra Anah, and Isi ben Yehuda said, I learned it from Gzeir Shava. It says, Ki Am Kodesh Ata by Basa v'cholav, V'anshe Kodesh Tiyon Li by Basa Treifa, so just like Treifa is Asa V'achila, this is Asa V'achila. What about the Isra Anah? So from that already a very complex Kal V'chomer with a Ma'atzad that goes into tomorrow's daf. So just one ha'ara as it relates to the Lamaisa. So the Lamaisa is that we learn it from the very Rabbi Shmuel. Echad l'Isra Achila, Echad v'Isra Bishul, the Echad v'Isra Hana. But just to bring out the ha'ara, just a little bit of a background. And that is, Rabbi Yaakov Bienenfeld told me that when he was a younger man in the Mir Yeshiva Koilel in Flatbush, so he hosted a Malava Malka for the Chavrei HaKoilel, and he invited Rabbi Yitzchak David Grossman to be the guest speaker. So who's Rabbi Yitzchak David Grossman? So he's a well-known Mekarev who lives in Eretz Yisrael. He's the Rav of Migdal HaEmek. He's a Chassidish Yid. He was born in Meir Sharim, raised in Meir Sharim. He's a man in his 70s today. And he started doing kiruv at a very young age, primarily for the Sfardim that lived in that area. And he's a world-renowned personality, a world-renowned Mekarev, and he's popularly known as the disco rabbi. And he became known as the disco rabbi because he would go into pubs and discotheques and places that people wouldn't go, and he'd be Mekarev them. Either way, Rabbi Bienenfeld is hosting this Malava Malka for a lot of Chasheva Yungalite, and he asked Rabbi Grossman to come and speak, to address the Olam. So he got up, he was a young man himself at the time, Rabbi Grossman, and he spoke about some of the kiruv that he's doing, and he spoke about how he goes here and he goes there. So one of the Yungalite that was there, he asked Rabbi Grossman, he says, it's very impressive what it is you do, but why aren't you worried that the places that you're going to will have a bigger hashpah on you than you are going to be mashpeh on them? He was a one-man show, Rabbi Grossman. I mean, he would go here on his own. He's a man in his 30s. So he said, why aren't you concerned that maybe it's going to have the reverse effect? And Rabbi Grossman told him on the spot, he said that the Gemara says in the halachas of Taruvos that if something is being maflit, you don't have to be worried that it's going to be Baileya. So he told him that his guiding principle is Aidi de Tarid lahaflit, any Baileya. And I'm going out to be maflit, I'm not worried that I'm going to be Baileya. So it sounds like a sharpful line, but the truth is that I think we could be Meirich on this a little bit. That is, there's a tshuva from the Chubina Rav in Doivev Meisharim, So it's in Chelik Aleph, and it's Siman Lamed. So he brings, at the end of the tshuva, he says like this, in a parentheses it says, Hu Rav HaGoyen HaMefursim Milublin, Zechreinu Levracha, B'yoysa B'Frankfurt am Main. So this Rav HaGoyen HaMefursim Milublin was in Frankfurt am Main, and there was a doctor, a chemist, Yorei Hashem. So this is a Choshev Yid, a Yorei Hashem, he's a chemist. He came over to the Rav, and he asked him the following question. He said, He said, they bring him different types of chocolate. So he said he was like a renowned chemist, and they would come to him and they would bring him different chocolates. And they wanted to know if there's a taroivis of basar inside, is it kosher or is it not kosher? So they would bring it to this Yid. And the Yid wanted to know, is it okay for him to cook the basar v'chalav, to cook the chocolate, because by cooking it and doing different experiments, heating it, he'll be able to determine whether or not there's basar v'chalav inside. And this was the question that he asked the Lublina Goyen, and the Lublina Goyen sent the Shaila to the Chabina Goyen. He wanted to know, is it okay or is it not? Meaning, what's the shaila? The problem is that if there's in fact basar inside this chocolate, that when he cooked the basar v'chalav, he was over the issa basar v'chalav. So can I cook chalav, in this case chocolate, to see whether or not there's basar inside the chocolate? In the event that maybe there is basar inside the chocolate, in which case I was already over the Isser. It's like a shmak shayla. At first glance you would say it's for sure Isser. You need a real koyach datera to be mad to this. Because when you cook it, you heat it, you boil it, there may be basar v'chalav inside. So it's a suffix Isser deraisa. You can't get involved in a suffix Isser of loisav asher gediba chalevima. Either way, this is the shayla that ended up at the desk of the Chabina Goyen. Said the Chabina Rav, l'daiti yesh l'tzadik tzas. I think I can come up with a heter, and it's based on a Kesef Mishnah in Hilchis Tumas HaMeis in Perek Aleph, Siv Cotton Beis. The Kesef Mishnah over there asks the Gevaldige Kasha. The Rambam says that if somebody eats basar v'chalav, he gets malchus. So if you eat basar v'chalav, you get malchus. Frank the Kesef Mishnah, how do you get malchus for eating basar v'chalav? Everybody knows. Ein oinshin min hadin. What does that mean? That means even though we have the Yud Gimel Midah Shatar and the Dreshes Behem, but at the same time, you don't get Malchus for doing an Isser, even an Isser Dairaisa, unless the Isser Dairaisa is Mefurish in the Torah, unless the Einish is Mefurish in the Torah. But Isser Basar v'chalav is not Mefurish in the Torah. How do you know Isser Basar v'chalav? We just learned 5 Mekairis. The Ikka Mekar, the one that seems to be brought down the halacha that the Shulchan Aruch paskins in the beginning of Siman Pei Zayin, is Echad L'Isser Bishul, Ve'echad L'Isser Achila, Ve'echad L'Isser Ana. The point is, it doesn't say Mefurish in the Torah that you're not allowed to eat Basar v'chalav. I only know it from a Kroy Yisera, from the fact that there's an extra mention of Leisav Asher V'Du Chalev Yimai. If that's the case, Freik the Kesef Mishnah, Ein Mazir Min Adin, Ein Oinshim Min Adin. How do you get Malchus for the lav of Basar v'chalav? Gevaldige Kasha. And the Kesef Mishnah, this is in the beginning of Hilchos Tumas HaMeis, talk about tucked away, gives 2 terutzim. The second teretz that he says is Inami, the mashma, said the Kesef Mishnah, it's mashma from the pasuk, Shaloi Asra Torah Levashel, El Kidei Shaloi Yavoy Lechel. It's mashma that even though it says in the Torah 3 times, but the ikar emphasis was really not on the bishul. The ikar emphasis is on the achila. That's really what's awesome. Interesting. What's really awesome is the achila. Now the Torah mentioned loisav asher. That's merely a harchaka that you shouldn't come to eat it. In other words, it's so chamer achilas basar b'chalav that don't even cook the basar, don't even have it. Because derech bishul asur Torah, don't even have the basar v'chalav in your house. So like this, you'll make sure it's a harchaka. Like this, you're not going to ever come to. You're not going to ever come to eating basar v'chalav. Don't have it, because if you have it, you may come to eat it. It's like the Torah says, Shivas yom nisar lo yimatzeh b'vatechem ki kol oichel machmetzes v'nichraso hanefesh ahimi Yisrael. Now Barbanel says that by the isser of Bal Yirah, it doesn't say anything about achilas basar v'chalav. But by the isser Bal Yimatzeh, right? Bal Yirah, Bal Yimatzeh. But by Bal Yimatzeh, the Torah gives a reason almost. Ki kol oichel machmetzes. I heard this from Reb Shmuel Yankiv. So he told me over this Barbanel. He said that Barbanel learns in the pasuk that the Isser Bal Yimatzeh is like a harchaka for the Isser Achila. Bal Yirah is an Isser B'fnei Yatzmai, but Bal Yimatzeh is don't even have chametz. You know why? Because if you eat chametz, it's an Isser Karis. It's so chamer gewalt for somebody to eat chametz. So don't even have it. That's what the Torah is saying. You know why? Because you're not allowed to eat Basa v'chalav derech bishul asur Torah. So Zok the Torah, don't cook it, because if you cook it, you may come to eat it. But what's the point? The point is, says the Kesef Mishnah, that even though it says Leisav Ashel, but we know the truth. The truth is the Iker is the Achila. If the Iker is the Achila, of course you're going to get Malchus on the Achila. As I state the Kesef Mishnah. Now Emma says, Shabina Ravi is back to me. He says, how did the Kesef Mishnah know to be Dirish time of the Krah? I mean, that's mamish what he's doing. Ulam beguf divrei HaKesef Mishnah tzarech yitzas in Darshina time of the Krah. Like make a taste. That's Rav Shimon Shit and Shas. Rav Shimon's Dirish time of the Krah. The Kesef Mishnah. The Mishnah Yosef is being Dirish time of the Krah to answer a kasha, but either way, he held this must have been the Makar. I mean, he must have felt that from the fact that there's an Isra, Achilas, Basa, V'chalav, this is a right, the Chazal with Dirish time of the Krah over here. And they held that even though the Torah mentions Bishul, but really the Iker is not the Bishul. The Iker is not the Bishul, the Iker is the Achila. That's why even though Achila is not Mefurish, it's only Min Hadin, still you're going to get Malchus. There's no problem with Mazir Min Hadin. There's no problem with Ein Oichim Min Hadin. Okay, based on that, said that Shabina Goyen, I'm going to tell you something very geschmack. The Gemara says in Masechtas, Psachim, I left the Gemara, it's fine. There's a machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim when you're supposed to be boidik. Now, we know when you do b'dikas chametz, or larbas, or boitkin as chametz, stating that, what happens if somebody didn't do b'dikas chametz when he was supposed to do it? So it got pushed off a little bit. He didn't do it. So say the Chachamim, you could do it already the next morning. And if you didn't do it the next morning, you could do it Mishei Shoyes Ulamayla. And if you didn't do it Mishei Shoyes Ulamayla, then you could do it on Yont. If you could do it on Chalamayt, you could do it whenever you want to do it. The Gemara. How could you do beer chametz? How could you go ahead and do bedikas chametz at a time that you're not allowed to eat the chametz? Why are you worried that you're going to find the chametz? And, wow, yeah, Shem yimtza gluska yafa, and you're going to go ahead and eat it. As I freak the Gemara, and the Gemara asks it from a brisa where you find that Issa Chadash, you're not even allowed to have the Issa Chadash because there's always a concern that you may come to eat it. So freak the Gemara. How could the Chachamim hold that if you didn't do B'dikas chametz in the appropriate time, you could always do it later, even after the Zman Isser Achila? Why are you concerned that if we're in the Zman Isser Achila, that when you find it, you may go ahead and eat it? Says the Gemara. You know why you're not worried? Says, because the Hu Atzmai Machser L'Seifer. Because what's this person doing now? He's burning it. The whole point is he's trying to find it to get rid of it. So what, you're concerned that he's going to go ahead and eat it? He's being Isaac right now in trying to destroy it. So if he's being Isaac in trying to destroy it, why do you have to be worried that right now he's going to go ahead and he's going to eat it? So it said that Shabina Goyen, that it could be, you could say, based on the Kesef Mishnah, that the Iker is a Bishul Basa V'chalav is a Gezerah Shema Yavai L'Eichlai. The Kesef Mishnah was already Dirish time of the Krah for us. He said it's Shema Yavai L'Eichlai. So if it's Shema Yavai L'Eichlai, then it could be over here. You don't have to be worried, Shema Yavai L'Eichlai. Because why is this Kemetz checking the chocolate? He's checking to make sure that there's no Basa V'chalav. That's the whole point. Because he knows there's an Issa Basa V'chalav. So while he's cooking the Basa V'chalav to find out if it's kosher or not, because Chas V'sholem, if there's Basa V'chalav, the Torah's Nish'esin. V'anshei kodesh tiyuliv, he's going to go ahead and eat it. It's mamish to Gemara and Tzachim. And he brings other places in Shas where you find the same idea. That if somebody is being involved right now in trying to get rid of something, you don't have to be worried that somehow he's going to be niskarif to it. It's Hepech HaSvara. So he says, based on that Gemara Tzachim, Daf Yud Aleph of an Aleph, he wanted to be this was his koyach hatera. He said it's going to be okay. It's interesting. The Hersh Pesach, the Tzvi Pesach Frank, Rabbi Yerushalayim and a tshuva. It's an Ilchas Basa V'chavos in Yeridei Simon Ayin Tes. He brings this tshuva from the David Meisharim, from the Shabina Goyen. He rather says that it could be there's another thing that Shabina Goyen didn't discuss in his tshuva, and that is, do you have the halach of ein bishul acha bishul? When it comes to Basa V'chalav, everybody knows on Shabbos, ein bishul acha bishul. And then some machlekes na Pesach. Today he brings in Shulchan Aruch. When you say ein bishul acha bishul, when it comes to Basa V'chalav, he says, because if you're going to say ein bishul acha bishul Basa V'chalav, which many places can hold, then it's anyways going to be mutter. Because what are you worried that there may be Basa V'chalav? There's only Basa V'chalav if it was cooked together. Derech bishul asr Torah. If it was cooked, then it was cooked already. So there's no problem cooking it a second time. Ein bishul acha bishul. Either way, he's also Meirich on the Kesef Mishnah and the Chiddush. And by the way, we didn't learn yesterday's daf together. But the truth is, in light of yesterday's daf, there's a lot to talk about with this Kesef Mishnah. But the punchline right now is not the Kesef Mishnah. The punchline is what the Shabina Goyen took out of this Kesef Mishnah, and what Tzvi Pesach took out of this Kesef Mishnah, and that is the Gemara in Masechtas Psachim Daf Yud Aleph, where the Gemara says, "Hu atzmai machzer l'sorfar mechol ka'achol minei," and that's something that's going to be true for Basa V'chalav. If the whole Issa Bishul is that you shouldn't come to eat it, so if right now I'm cooking it to get rid of it in the event that there's Basa V'chalav, there's no chashash, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to eat it. I'm just thinking that Rabbi Grossman at Rabbi Binefeld's Malava Malka, Rabbi Yitzchak David Grossman, he said that he's not worried about doing kiruv in these dangerous places. And he shtaled to a sugya in Hilchos Basar V'chalav. What was the sugya he shtaled to? I did the Torah the half with anybody there. Maybe he shtaled to another sugya in Basar V'chalav. And that's this Shabina Goyim right here. That's this Har Tzvi. It's this Gemara of Sachin. There's an idea of who Atzmai, Machzer. He's going ahead and he's trying to get rid of it. If you're cooking Basar V'chalav to get rid of Basar V'chalav, you don't have to be worried you're going to eat the Basar V'chalav. If you're looking after the chametz to be mevayer the Basar V'chalav, you don't have to be worried you're going to eat the Basar V'chalav. So if a person is being oisek right now, you're right, he's getting a value. He has the chametz in his hand. Isn't that dangerous? Of course it's dangerous. But why are you holding the chametz? To get rid of the chametz. You're holding the chametz to get rid of it. You have to be worried that you're going to come eat it. You're cooking the Basar V'chalav. You're mamish cooking Basar V'chalav. But the whole issue is you might eat it. Well, you're worried you're going to eat it? How am I going to eat it? I'm mamish involved in getting rid of it. Of course I'm not going to eat it. So if somebody's involved in getting rid of these things, could be there's no chashash. Of course, I'll ask your local rabbi. This is Shaloi Aliba de Hilchasa, my part. But just a ha'ara.